In this video, I'm going to explain the difference between absolute and relative cell referencing, and it's an important topic to understand if you're going to use Excel effectively. And in fact, if you don't understand it, you basically can't use Excel if you have very much data at all. So let's get right into it. I have some employees who have a salary, and I want to add the commission to their salary. So obviously, the formula is just going to be a simple equal, and then I click on their salary, I hit the plus sign, and then I click on the commission. So we're adding those two cells, and as you've seen in previous videos, if I double click on the autofill handle, it'll fill that down. And the cool part is the formula knows to change, right? What we started out with is B4 plus C4. By the time it gets down here, it's B11 plus C11, and we didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to type every formula. How does Excel know to do that? Well, here's how. Basically, this formula is a relative formula. And so what we mean is relative to my position in this cell, D4, I'm going to add up the cells that are 2 to my left plus the cell 1 to my left. And so it's about its relative position. So in other words, if I come down here, I'm going to add up the cell that's 2 to its left plus 1 to its left. And that rule applies all the way down. So when I get to the very bottom, I'm adding up the cell that's 2 to the left plus 1 to the left. That's how Excel knows to change that cell reference as you drag the formula down. Pretty darn handy. If I had 10,000 employees, I only have to type that formula once, double click, and it'll do it for all 10,000. Now, where does this become a problem? Down here in this example, same employees, same salary, but I want to give everybody the same commission. Where up here, everybody had a different commission. So I'm going to take this cell and simply add that cell. Now those are relative references, which is basically saying take the cell 1 to my left and add it to the cell that's to the left and 10 down. So I'm going to hit enter, and this time I'm not going to double click, I'm just going to drag down 1. And notice this guy's not getting his 250. Why is that? Well, when I double click, the relative formula, these relative cell references, I'm taking the cell 1 to my left, plus 1 left, and 10 down. There's nothing here. And obviously, if I keep dragging it down, it only gets worse, right? So now it's 1 to the left, 10 down. There's no data down here. So what I want to do is absolutely reference B26. I don't want that to be relative. I'll use the term lock. I want to lock on B26, and so that's called an absolute reference. How do you make something be an absolute reference? You put dollar signs. Now there's a keystroke for that. It's the F4 key. Depending on your computer or your laptop, you may have to hold down the function key. And if you click it once, it puts dollar signs in front of the B and the 26. That's an absolute reference. It means it won't change. And by the way, those dollar signs, if you hit the F4 key again, it'll put a dollar sign, I'll move my mouse cursor, just on the 26. If I hit it again, it'll be just on the B. And if I hit it again, it takes it off. And one more time, it puts it on both. So that F4 key is a toggle. I believe on a Macintosh, it is the Command and the T key that will do the same thing. It's not going to be the F4 key. You can obviously just type these, which is the dollar sign right above the 4 key, so you'd have to hit Shift 4, and you can type them in, but obviously the F4 key on a Windows computer or the Command T is just a little bit quicker. So anyway, now we can hit Enter, and when I drag this formula down, notice what was B17 plus B26 now becomes B18 plus B26. Double click, and it'll go all the way down. So obviously B18, B19, B20, that's a relative reference, so I kept moving, but the B26 stays, it's absolute, it's fixed on B26. So that's also critically important to understand, because again, if you had 10,000 employees and you want to give everybody the same commission, you don't have time to hand enter every formula, which is really what you'd have to do. Now, let's take another example. I want to increase everybody's salary by 3%. So first of all, we need to know how to do that math, and that's what I have in here. There's two ways to do it. Basically, you're going to take a number times the percentage, right? So whatever the number is and whatever the percentage, and then you add it back to that number. So my example, let's say I want to increase 100 by 10%. Well, 100 times 10%, that's 10 bucks or 10, assuming dollars, $10. And then we add that back to 100, so we're going to get 110. The other way to do that, if you do your math, you can figure out that this is basically just x times 1 plus the percentage. All right, so another way of doing it is taking that 100 times 1 plus 10%. That will also be 110. So going to our example, I want to do that, raise everybody's salary by 3%. So I am going to do example 2. I'm going to take their salary. I'm going to multiply it times parenthesis 1 plus, what's the percentage? It's right here. Now, hopefully you'll recognize that as I copy this formula down, J12 is going to move on me, and I don't want it to. So I click on J12, I hold the function key in my particular case and hit F4, and that will lock or absolute cell J12. So that's an absolute reference, and then I have a relative reference. Now when I drag that formula down or double click, when I come down here, I have the right salary being multiplied by the right percentage all the way through here. Let's do another common example on the next sheet over, and that is I want to calculate the proportion of total. So again, I'll explain the math. Basically, how to calculate a percentage of total is how much has each piece contributed to the total. I'm going to take each piece and divide it by the total. Well, I have the total already here. So I want to take this divided by that total. And then I want to take this and divide it by the total, and that divided by the total. So I simply have to take each piece, so equal, got a minus sign in there, that dollar amount divided by the total. I'm going to copy this formula down. The total needs to stay fixed. So one more time, I'm going to hit the F4 key on the keyboard, or Command T if you're on the Mac, and hit Enter. So B10 is now fixed. This is formatted as a percentage. I can drag this down to here, and now we'll have each piece divided by the total. In order to beat this to death, let's do one more example where we'll get a little bit more sophisticated. I want to take people's salary and calculate the tax. And I just have a made-up rule here. They're going to be taxed at 18% on everything above $3,000. Right? So if you earn less than $3,000, there's no tax. So this person should have zero tax. This person will have zero tax. But this person is going to get taxed on everything above $3,000. So how much is that? That's $4,000 minus $3,000, right? So there's $1,000 at 18%. So we can kind of have a sense for what the tax should be. How do we do this? We'll use the if function. And so I'm going to type equal if because I need to know, is their salary above $3,000? So parentheses, I'm taking a look at my tooltip and I want a logical test. The question is their salary greater than, and you don't want to type 3,000, I want to reference the cell. So I click on that cell, and as I drag this formula down, I should recognize that, oh, I need to lock on that. I need to make that absolute, so I'm going to hit the F4 key. There's my logical test. Is their salary greater than our minimum? Comma. So I put in the comma. What am I going to do if that's true? Oh, well then I need to figure out how much above 3,000 they are. So I'm going to take their salary and subtract the 3,000. So that's going to give me the 1,000. I mean, we can do the math right there. B13, oh yeah, I need to absolute that because again, I'm going to drag this formula down and I don't want that to move. So there's the 1,000, right? 4 minus 3. And then I have to multiply that by our tax rate, 18%. Well, guess what? That's also right here, and it needs to be fixed. So again, F4 or Command T if you're on a Mac. So there is what I'm going to do if it's true that their salary is above 3,000, comma, what if this is false, that their salary is not above 3,000? Well, then, of course, there is no tax. We'll just type a 0. And now we close up our if function, and I can hit enter. Now, be careful before you hit enter. Just look through your formula, and you'll start to recognize that when you have factors in your Excel spreadsheets, anytime you reference those factors, those are going to have to be absolute references. And so B13 every time, and B12, I need to absolute those. The salary, I want to remain relative, so when I drag it down, it'll go to the next person, B3, B4, B5. So I'm good to go. They owe $180, but if I go down one, double check, yeah, I still am locked on this. I'm using the 2,800, and obviously that's not above 3,000, so they have 0. Why is there a dash here? Accounting format. That's a 0 in accounting format. And anyway, you drag the rest of the way down and we're able to calculate people's tax. And again, how important is it to be able to do absolute references? If I had 10,000 employees and I needed to do this calculation, I type it once, double click, and I'm done. If you don't put those dollar signs and you double click, well, then obviously these values will move down your sheet and you can't do it. You will get the wrong answer. Now let's talk about mixed references where things get a little more sophisticated, and we'll figure out why we would only put a dollar sign on either just the B or just the 13. Moving over to the next sheet. Here's what I have. I have some salaries, benefits, service, and software. Here is our budget for this year, but I want to increase that budget each year by these percentages. Now, I have this spreadsheet set up so that these items are in the same order as these items. And the beauty is, if I know how to do mixed references, I'll be able to type this formula once, copy it across, and then copy it down. Now, before we do that, let's understand what happens to a formula when you copy it. So right here, just to give me some information, I'm just going to put a 1, and then I'm just going to drag this down and fill in with some 1s. And this formula, it's a one-cell formula. It's just going to be equal that cell. It's a one-cell formula so we can understand what happens when we copy a formula down. So I hit enter. There's my formula, G7. What happens when I copy it down? It's G8. G9, right? It's relative. It's basically saying, hey, I equal a cell to my left. But notice what doesn't change. It's a G, it's a G, it's a G. If I drag this all the way down, it's a G. The only thing changes when you copy a formula down is the row number. The column doesn't change anyway, right? It stays column G, column G, column G, right? What if I copy this formula to the right? So I will copy it to the right. Maybe I'll do it a couple times. It's H7. It's I7. Well, what didn't change? The 7. I'm on row 7, and when I copy a formula across, it stays 7. And the only thing that changes was the G went to H. The G went to I. The G went to J. So you have to think ahead when you enter a formula. How am I going to copy it? And what will change? So you need to memorize these rules right here. There's no other way of doing it. You need to understand when I copy a formula down, the only piece of the formula that'll change will be the row number. When I copy a formula across, the only piece of that formula that'll change is the column letter. So let's just do it one more time with a little more sophisticated of a formula. We're just going to add these two cells, J1 and J2. Cool. When I drag this to the right, I'm going to copy this to the right. What's going to change? Not the 1 and the 2, but the J and the K. Okay, so let's go over here and look. It's like, oh yeah, it changed K1, K2. And if I drag it over here, you go, oh, it's L1, L2. But the 1 and the 2 never changed because I've copied it to the right. And obviously, when I drag this formula down, what's going to change? Not the J, just the row number. So when I drag it down 1, now I have 2, 3 rather than 1 and 2. Because I've copied the formula down, the column doesn't change. Whew! So let's apply that to this situation over here. I'm going to say equal. I want to increase this budget by that amount. So running back to our very first, I'm going to go x times 1 plus the percentage. So here we go. Equal the budget times parentheses. Oh, that's not times. Times the parenthesis 1 plus the percentage. Now, if I hit F4, I have locked on that cell. So here's the problem. I want to drag this formula down, right? And B14, I want to go to B15 because that's my benefits. I want it to go to equipment because that's the next item down, right? I don't want 14 to be locked. But when I drag to the right, I need it to stay on column B. I don't want it to go C, D, E because there's nothing here. So basically I come back up here and I use my F4 key to only lock on the B. So I hit F4 key twice. I want to lock on the B. So when I copy this formula to the right, it doesn't go C14, D14, E14 because there's nothing in these cells. When I drag this formula down, I want it to go B15 because that's benefits. B16 is equipment, B17. So that is called a mixed reference. If you haven't done this a lot, it can be a little confusing. And what I suggest to people is you just drag a formula one cell. Don't get carried away. Double click on it and go, am I doing the math on the things that I want to do the math on? And in this case, you're like, oh yeah, that's working. And then I can drag it one more time and go, oh yeah, it's still working. Then I can grab all three and drag down just one and come over here and go, oh yeah, benefits, this is working, right? You can click on this one and go, that times the benefits. Anyway, once you're confident that you have it right, you can just drag down through the rest of the data. Again, the benefit of being able to type a formula once and then drag it across and drag it down. What if I was doing this for 30 years, right? I want to increase it every day for 30 years and or I've got 100 items, right? Being able to type a formula once and be able to drag all the way across and all the way down is a huge time saver and you have to be able to do it to be effective at Excel. So let's do one more example. Again, to beat this to death, and this is a little more confusing, this mixed reference stuff. So here's my example. I have, again, these exports from Brazil, and this time we do it by quarter. So I've sold to Italy every quarter different amounts, okay? And then, of course, I'll have a total across Q1 for all my different countries. How do I put these totals in real quickly? If you've watched the video I provided by Myrna or whatever, the gal from Australia, she'll show you how you select the blank row, blank column, and just hit BAM, auto sum. Hashtags just means we don't have enough room. So I will select through here and double click. Now we're good to go. So we have our totals, we have this total. Here's the question I'm trying to answer. How much did quarter one contribute to the total for Italy? How much did quarter one of Germany contribute to the total for Germany? So we can kind of check with the percentage to see which quarters we do well in and which quarters we don't do as well in. So I am going to copy this table. If I hold down the control key, I'll create a copy. And then I'm going to just get rid of all of the data right down here. Because what we want to calculate is this as a percent of that total. So we know it's just simply this cell divided by that total. Cool. Now, which way am I going to drag the formula? Let's just pick, we want to be able to drag it both ways. I want to drag down and across. So it's this F5. When I go across, what changes? The F. I don't want the F to change. I don't want it to go G5, H5, I5. I need it to stay on F. So this time I'm just going to type the $sign in. I'm going to type it in front of the F. Now, how about the B? When I drag across, do I want B5 to go to C5? Yeah, I do. Do I want it to go to D5? Yep, I do. But each time I want to divide that by F5. So I think we're good there. Now the question is, how about if I drag it down? B5 will go to B6 because when you drag down, the row changes. And you're like, all right, whoopsie, I'm good with that. B6 is what I want, the 830. Now the F5 will go to F6. Oh, I think I'm good with that. I want B6 to be divided by F6. Again, when you drag down, the only thing that changes is the row number. So I think by putting that one little $sign on the F, I've made it so this formula can be dragged across and down. So I'm going to hit enter. Let's go check it out. We're calculating our percentages, so I'll go ahead and increase that percent. Let's add a decimal. And because this is kind of confusing, let's drag it over 1 and see how we're looking. Oh yeah, 840 divided by 2250. Now let's drag it just down 1 and see how we look. 830 divided by 2940. Yeah, I think we're good. So then you go yippee skippy and you drag it all the way across and all the way down, and we're done. Now to confirm, we can select this and make sure it's totaling 100% down here in our status bar. You're like, oh yeah, that's 100%. And of course it would probably be 100% for every one of these. And that's it. So now you can look and go, okay, that looks like, at least for US, our big quarters are Q2 and Q3. Maybe in Japan it's Q2, right? So you can look at those numbers and figure out which quarters are your better quarters for each country. The important part, again, is being able to type a formula one time, and whether you have 100 quarters or 100 different countries, it's the same amount of work. Once you get that formula set up, you can drag it across and drag it down. As a general rule of thumb, if you find yourself typing a formula over and over and over again, you're doing it wrong. Just stop, because there's got to be a better way, right? So if you're typing it here, then typing it there, and then typing it here, then you're doing it wrong. There's going to be a way to do it where you can absolute a particular cell reference and only have to type it once. The only way to learn this is by practicing doing what I just did here. You drag it once and take a look to see if it's working right, or you drag it once down and take a look to see if it's working right. It just takes practice to get it figured out. And then, of course, memorizing this rule. Once you understand, when you drag a formula down, the only thing that changes is the row number. So I don't have to worry about the G. And when you drag a formula across, the only thing that changes is the column number. So I don't have to worry about the row 7. So having said that, over here on proportionate total, remember we locked on B10, said absolutely. Well, realistically, it doesn't hurt to have the $sign on B, but guess what? If you didn't have the $sign on B, it doesn't matter because we're copying the formula down and the B wouldn't have changed anyway. I happen to leave it there because when you hit F4 on the keyboard, it puts both of them in, and the one on the B doesn't hurt anything. So you're like, all right, I'll just leave it there. But if you understand absolute and relative reference, you recognize that the B, the $sign on the B, didn't have to be there because as I copy this down, the B wasn't going to move on me anyway. So that's it about absolute and relative reference.